Let's unravel Geeta's world. Speaking about the future, that with Sheikh Hasina gone now, Bangladesh will fall to the Islamic fundamentalists. Can we actually conclude that? Because
I don't think so. I don't think it'll fall to the fundamentalists.
you think army will play
I'll
a
tell
role
you
over-
why.
Okay.
Yes, because the army is in control right now. The army is not like the army we see in Pakistan. There was a time they were.
In an interview with the Indian Express, Nobel laureate and Grameen Bank founder Professor Mohammed Yunus, like you quoted him earlier, he was speaking to the Indian Express and he said regarding this internal affairs, India doesn't meddle with Bangladesh's internal affair because it's an internal affair. So he said that, but it really hurts, this idea, and I'll quote him, he said that, if there is a fire in the brother's house, how can I say it is an internal affair? Because diplomacy has a much richer vocabulary than saying it is their internal affair. If something is happening in Bangladesh where 170 million people are angry with each other, youth are being killed by government bullets, law and order is disappearing, it doesn't need experts to tell that, it won't be contained within the borders of Bangladesh. It will spill over to its neighbors. So how do we draw the line then?
I'll tell you. For India and Bangladesh, it's a very thin line that you have to see you don't cross, and yet the thin line blurs very easily and very often. But internally, I think our security establishment was also telling her that, well, you need to see what's happening on the ground. I don't know whether if they were on the ball in reading the situation exactly the way it is, but it's not like they weren't monitoring. Sheikh Hasina should have done better for her own people.
Clearly.
That she's out is not because of anything but the things that have transpired.
Yeah.
But, there is a but. But also because there was a massive political movement against her.
Hello and welcome to the 99th episode of Geeta's World. After a long day, hectic day, Geeta is here to record with us. How are you, Geeta? How is the whatever has ensued? And this is the topic of our discussion today. I mean, you were like really swamped, breakings.
Yes.
So
we all were tracking the protests in Bangladesh, and yes, things were getting out of hand. But the fact that it would be so sudden and on such short notice that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina would have to leave Bangladesh, that was absolutely unanticipated.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a very busy few days for us.
Right. I mean,
especially yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Bangladesh is like the third South Asian country after Afghanistan. I mean, what we saw in Afghanistan, what we saw in Sri Lanka, I mean, those were like those visuals that we are seeing right now in Bangladesh. They are reminiscent of a violent, like a very unprecedented and chaotic scene that we have seen in other countries. So let's understand. I mean, there are lots of things basically because still it's developing. I mean, you're being updated like minute by minute. So she has finally come to Delhi. I mean, she landed in Ghaziabad yesterday. So Ajit Doval, he met with her, and just this morning, I think Union Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar, he briefed an all-party meeting which was convened by the Indian government, and he appreciated the unanimous support and understanding extended by various parties because there were other parties involved. And he also said that India now maintains a wait-and-watch strategy while keeping its army on alert because all the borders, I mean, the BSF is on alert. But, before getting into the specifics, because right now, like the army chief has declared that, there will be an interim government, but we don't know what will that look like. And especially the matter of, the matter still remains that this was all on the basis of a quota, the reservation thing that had irked students. The matter has culminated now that Sheikh Hasina has fled and she has come to India and she's seeking asylum in UK. And because this is not the first time that the students have protested, I think in 1993, if you like really go back, 1993 also was the time when students protested against the quota system. then in 2018, then in 2013, and then in 2018. That's how it was abolished, and later now it was reinstated. So what really went wrong this time? Because we saw Sheikh Hasina actually telling, I mean, naming the student protesters as terrorists. So do you think that was the time when she got it all wrong and this just
I think
culminated?
there's a mix of a lot. Yes, it also has to do with her attitude towards the protesters. When students protest, you don't call them razakars and
Yeah.
terrorists. That is certainly a no, no. But she was fighting too many elements and factions. Now let's first begin with how did it culminate to this?
Yeah.
There are a lot of issues. While Awami League and Sheikh Hasina's government has been very, very good for India and for Indian security architecture in the region, especially the border areas between India and Bangladesh, there certainly are issues when it comes to how she's handled and conducted herself within Bangladesh. And it has to do with the fact that how elections are held. Now, it began with the entire agitation, so to say, or questioning of Sheikh Hasina began in her last term itself,
Yeah.
when the opposition had boycotted, and then she came, to power with a thumping majority, obviously because of the opposition
Yeah.
boycott. Thereafter, we saw the investigations cases against Khalida Zia, an opponent. Putting opponents behind bars is also not the best way to go about things.
Right.
Having said that, if there are charges against anybody in the opposition, then so be it. But yes, she was jailed. Then, and in all this, we've seen Sheikh Hasina do quite well for Bangladesh's economy. The GDP is highest in South Asia, in the whole of South Asia, much higher than India as well.
India, yeah, right.
So they've done quite well there. But then what happened was that certain quarters started saying that she has become autocratic. She is not listening to anybody, and she works with a small coterie of people. Appointment of the army chief is also has also been a matter of controversy or contention, where certain countries, certain quarters thought he had this certain proclivity or leaning towards the Chinese. But all that now can be said in hindsight. You can say he had, so did she. She also worked with the Chinese.
Yeah.
That certainly did not go down very well with the West.
Right.
And we've seen then a systematic criticism of Sheikh Hasina government from the West as well. The last election,
talking about democracy and everything.
Yes, the last election was damning. Now, what happens is in both Pakistan and Bangladesh, East and erstwhile West and erstwhile East Pakistan, right? They had the same ways of conducting election, that there would be an interim government, and that interim government will then conduct a free, fair, transparent election in the country. Sheikh Hasina refused to have or form an interim government after her term ends, and so her government conducted the elections. Again, there was a boycott by the opposition.
Yeah.
That's when everybody said, this is authoritarian. Why is she not listening to others? Why is she allowing this? And then how is an election without the opposition a fair fight at all? That's when you had all the other supporters of BNP, Jamaat, really waiting in the wings to see if they get that one little space.
Yeah.
And that quota proposal was that space. So when that came about and there was massive agitation from within the students' bodies and universities from across Bangladesh, they did come out and say, they did announce a rollback, right? But nobody was paying heed.
Yeah.
Because then it had taken a political turn. The BNP and Jamaat had completely taken over the narrative, the political narrative of what's happening on the ground. And what we saw thereafter were massive protests that continued. Initially, they were against Sheikh Hasina. Then, how did she react to the protests are also important. The heavy-handedness, police firing, students being killed,
Yeah, I mean,
again, didn't go down well with anybody. And
Yeah.
then that was another opportunity for the opposition to take control of the entire protest itself.
yeah.
And then when the decision was made of a rollback,
Mm.
nobody is paying heed.
Nobody is paying it because
In
it's
fact, what they did was they went ahead
Mm.
demanding not just a rollback of the quota, they demanded now the singular demand had become resignation of Sheikh Hasina from
Right.
Prime Minister's position.
Right.
And they worked towards that very systematically for the past few days. The only thing is that we still thought that the army and the police forces had a handle on the situation. Not to the extent that they could contain it, because we saw how it was getting out of hand, but not to the extent that for the protesters, that they would actually be able to breach
Mhm.
the security.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely not anticipated.
That
Yeah.
was not the security cordon of the Prime Minister's house,
Yeah.
Ganabhavan. So, and now we're told that the army chief finally ended up giving Sheikh Hasina only 45 minutes
Yeah.
to leave the country.
First resign and then leave. Yeah.
So that in itself is a
Mm.
story for,
I mean, generations to tell.
yeah.
Yeah. But what happens now is the $1 million question right now, because, although Bangladesh, like you said, the army chief, Zaman, he has said that, there will be an interim government. But he also, while he was addressing, I mean, that's how I saw that he did not sound that confident that, because he was also taken aback to see such a situation unfolding. I mean, that was just unprecedented. But like he said that we can form an interim government right now and we can bring peace. But what is the idea of peace right now at this moment for the Bangladeshis? What will it take to ensure peace in such a volatile situation? Because, like you said, it changed to like a very political matter when the students and the protesters said that we demand Sheikh Hasina's resignation, and now they are celebrating this fact that she has fled, and they are saying that now we don't want like a military rule, we want a democratic setup. But like the army chief is declaring that we will ensure peace. How will that come into play? How will that peace be ensured in such a volatile situation right now?
So now the violence continues,
Hmm.
because we'll have to wait and see how the army now conducts itself. But there is no particular reason for them to continue now, right? There's one very particular demand that certain student bodies have, and that is to have Professor Yunus,
Oh, right.
Nobel laureate, as the chief advisor to the interim government.
Yeah, you had an interview with
I
him.
spoke to him earlier, and I was asking him whether, if, long ago he had, when he was becoming a political opponent of Sheikh Hasina, he did float a party, and he very soon realized that it was not for him, obviously, because of the backlash he's had to suffer at the hands of the Hasina government. And so I asked him, things are changing in Bangladesh. Do you still harbor or have political ambitions?
Yeah.
And he said, I have no political ambition.
Yeah.
And let's see.
Yeah.
All I want is to see a future of Bangladesh that's prosperous. I want to see the future generations live in peace, do well. And he spoke very well about entrepreneurship and not employment. He said, it's not just about employment generation. We are looking at microfinancing, so everybody is an entrepreneur. They don't need to have a boss. They should be able to work and earn for themselves. So great things that he's been working on, but there were massive corruption charges against him, and he's denied all of them.
Yeah.
And he does not have political ambitions, but being a chief advisor is not certainly does not fall in that realm of a politician per se. So let's see. That is one very critical, important demand. But also the other things that happened after the meeting with the president. So the president held a meeting, and under him, he had all the political parties barring Awami League and the civil society group join him. And there were some unanimous decisions that were taken. Now, those are very important. The first one was peace and stability, to restore peace and stability, asking and urging the citizens not to be violent,
Yeah.
exercise restraint. Then it said the immediate release of BNP chairperson Khaleda Zia.
Yeah. That is, I think,
Yes,
very vital. Yeah.
that's important. After 7 years,
Yeah, after
7 years,
7 years. Yeah.
she will be out of prison, which certainly is a very important chapter, so to say. Now, for India, it might spell disaster.
Yeah, because she was the former prime minister,
And she's the face of an anti-India tirade
yeah.
or movement
Yeah.
within Bangladesh.
And I think there was this famous rivalry which was called Battle of Begums.
Yes.
Right? Between
Yes, so Begum
Hasina and
Hasina is left and
right,
Begum Zia
Khaleda
is
Zia.
going to be released.
But she is already very.
She is also quite unwell.
Quite unwell,
But
right?
then her party is now going to be very important. Her son will become a very important. Tariq Zia is going to become very important. He's sitting right now in London, very close to the Pakistani and the Pak ISI. So we are going to see a whole mix of Bangladesh, Pakistan, China yet again. And while the West condemned Sheikh Hasina, they failed to realize how strategically important it was for India. And in doing what they've done and supporting the people on the other side. So I at the end of the day, Anna, we're journalists. Right. We should be with the people, right? And we should speak for them. So if it is for India, it might have been a bad story or is a bad story. But if it's about Bangladesh, then Sheikh Hasina should have done better for her own people.
Clearly.
That she's out is not because of anything but the things that have transpired. Yeah. But there is a but. But also because there was a massive political movement against her. During elections, after the boycott, there was an entire India Out campaign. And we've discussed it.
Of course.
Yeah. The Maldives, taking a leaf out of the Maldives, there's an absolute India Out campaign.
They started boycotting Indian goods.
They started doing all of that.
Sari became so political.
Yeah, sari, which both countries wear, are very proud of, had become a political thing, saying that Sheikh Hasina buys all the saris from India. Yeah. All of that. So the India Out campaign was very important. And for India, it was very important to have Sheikh Hasina there. Did we really get to the Western partners well enough for them to understand how important it is to have Sheikh Hasina? So because I say this, and I talk about Western hypocrisy more often than not, Anna. So over here also, look at the flip side. You are okay doing away with the Hasina and having BNP and Jamaat in the streets of Bangladesh. Yesterday we saw Jamaat go across Bangladesh to all the minority communities. And when I say minority communities over here, might I add, most of them were Hindus of Bangladesh, Hindu Bangladeshis.
Right.
And went to their homes, went inside their homes.
Torched their homes.
And threatened the men, women, children. So many of them so scared. And yes, there were some good neighbors who took them in. Their homes were torched. The colonies were torched. The temples were torched. The temples were ransacked. The temples were vandalized. So all of that has happened. And this is not coming from somebody who's religious, or this is just to do with the fact that there is religious disharmony right now. Is that an acceptable alternative in Bangladesh?
Yeah.
What Awami League did in the past decade and a half is contain this problem of radicalism within Bangladesh.
But
there was a
how
time.
How did they contain that? Was just to stay in power.
This is different. To contain students' protest to do with quota is very different from containing the Jamaat and saying stay within your little barracks that you have created. Do not come out and create disharmony in the country.
Yeah,
that is very different.
Agreed.
So they have unleashed these radical elements into the streets. and people are not feeling safe. There are people in Calcutta, Bangladeshis who had come for treatment. One person who said, I have to go back. And he said, I'm very worried. This is to one of our reporters. And so the reporter asked why. He said, because I'm a Hindu. And I've spoken to my family and they're saying things in my city don't look very good.
So, in the midst of this, there was West Bengal BJP leader Suvendu Adhikari. He said yesterday only that he made a big remark. He said that he asked people to get ready for over 1 crore Bangladeshi Hindus coming to India. And this rhetoric, like you said, it has started emerging, even being promoted by members of the ruling BJP here. But like that with, now with Sheikh Hasina gone, you think Bangladesh, it is just the beginning. But I'm speaking about the future, that with Sheikh Hasina gone now, Bangladesh will fall to the Islamic fundamentalists. Can we actually conclude that? Because
I don't think so. I don't think it'll fall to the fundamentalists.
You think army will play
I'll
a
tell
role
you
over it?
why.
Okay.
No, because the army is in control right now. The army is not like the army we see in Pakistan. There was a time they were. It would fall into military control.
Yeah.
But Bangladesh, there was no military coup here. This is not a military coup. This is a military takeover.
Definitely.
Just for an interim period. So what is going to happen, Anna, next? There's going to be an interim government.
Yeah.
And then after the interim government, there has to be elections. If there have to be these elections that would have to be held. And if elections are going to be held, your supporters of BNP Jamaat came out into the streets. But did all the voters of Awami League come to the streets to defend? Did they really want to get into that war and fight with BNP and Jamaat? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe they felt unsafe. Most of them felt very unsafe. I spoke to a lot of my friends over there. They were like, we are unsafe because we've been criticizing Jamaat. And now they're there. They're out there with certain, not protection of the state, but of course, overlooking right now the things that are happening by the political opponents. And we will see a lot of the Khaleda Zia time ex-army officers being reinstated. One was reinstated not so long ago, and he apparently had committed a lot of atrocities, according to reports, during the war. So they're being reinstated. And so it is going to be a very different Bangladesh. But then there will be elections. And there will be monitoring. So we'll have to wait and see if the Awami League voters will actually come out and vote Awami League in or not.
But elections mostly have been a farce in Bangladesh, considering
not always.
I mean, like
because of the boycott.
Yeah, since
because of the boycott, the last time around and this time around.
Mostly not free and fair in terms of like how Sheikh Hasina has, under Sheikh Hasina's rule, it has been alleged that the elections are not free and fair.
That's because of the whole contention of not having an interim government. But it's not like Awami League has lost popularity completely. It's not like people don't realize what Awami League has done. They also do realize that there's political opportunism in this entire quota protest. And will Awami League or can Awami League be completely written off? I don't know. I don't think so. There's an entire lot in Bangladesh that's not radical, that's not fundamentalist, who really want good ties with India, who do not think that Pakistan can be a solution. So what do you do to that?
Very important point, yeah. But it's also like, if you look at Awami League party, I mean, it took over 13 years, they did not realize this, but now they are realizing, I mean, somebody said from their party that they failed to understand the pulse of the people. So it took...
They did. They did fail to understand. She did fail to understand.
But this realization that, you can't be just like in the power, staying in the power just for the sake of being in the power, right?
It's not like she didn't do things. She did work for the country a lot. But I think she, all concerns regarding these protests and how to contain them, the idea of human rights violations which are being noted looked into, being monitored by the West and various other countries. For India, Awami League and Sheikh Hasina was so important.
Yeah.
There's such an important element to our regional security that we were willing maybe to look the other way on certain things. But internally, I think our security establishment was also telling her that, well, you need to see what's
Is
happening
it?
on the ground. I don't know whether if they were on the ball in reading the situation exactly the way it is,
Okay.
but it's not like they weren't monitoring. They were monitoring. The only
Monitoring?
difference is that their monitoring was to do with assessing with how best can she still stay in power. The West's monitoring was in how best can she be removed from power.
Yeah.
So their monitoring and their ways of what next were very different. Over here, they would be saying that, well, now is the time maybe. But look, here, maybe India and the West were not looking at the Bangladesh situation. They were not
They were
seeing
looking at
it,
their own
seeing it
strategic
from the same
interests.
page. But then who were they, what perspective or spectrum were they looking at Bangladesh from? The China spectrum. Over here, China does have a foothold in Bangladesh. You're concerned about Bangladesh, China having a foothold in within Bangladesh, and Hasina administration and the army being close to the Chinese. But doing away with them and having BNP is not going to get West any closer to Bangladesh at all. In fact, if anything, they're going to get closer now to China and Pakistan. So I think it's a loss situation for certainly for India, but also for anybody in the West who thought that this could be a great in within the BIMSTEC. Bangladesh is critical. So this entire we have SAARC gone. What happens to BIMSTEC? And if India and Bangladesh are not going to be on the same page, then BIMSTEC will also fall apart.
So, in an interview with the Indian Express, Nobel laureate and Grameen Bank founder, Professor Mohammed Yunus, like you quoted him earlier, he was speaking to the Indian Express and he said regarding this internal affairs, India doesn't meddle with Bangladesh's internal affair because it's an internal affair. So he said that, but it really hurts this idea, and I'll quote him. He said that, if there is a fire in the brother's house, how can I say it is an internal affair? Because diplomacy has a much richer vocabulary than saying it is their internal affair. If something is happening in Bangladesh where 170 million people are angry with each other, youth are being killed by government bullets, law and order is disappearing, it doesn't need experts to tell that, it won't be contained within the borders of Bangladesh. It will spill over to its neighbors and probably will see it. So migrants, being one such issue. So, what do you think of this? I mean, you agree with whatever Yunus is saying because, this internal affairs has been quoted many, many, many times, even if something is happening in India. For example, the Kejriwal case is just a matter.
It's a very important point you make. Yeah, what about Kejriwal?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just quoting that, when this entire Kejriwal fuss was happening and for example, the US is commenting that India shouldn't do this just before elections, you are jailing people and everything. So India says that, no, it's an internal matter and the US or any other country doesn't have the right to say anything. So how do we draw the line then?
I'll tell you. For India and Bangladesh, it's a very thin line that you have to see you don't cross. And yet, the thin line blurs very easily and very often. Why do I say that? Now, when things are happening in Bangladesh and you have a Sheikh Hasina government which is absolutely pro-India, and anyone else, any other alternative will either have a mix of anti-India or really very harshly anti-India elements within that combine. So then you look at things that are happening, you advise them personally in a very, very unofficial, or even if it's official, secretive manner or capacity. Tell them exactly what's happening diplomatically through the back channels, but you don't report it because she's a friend. That's when you say it's an internal matter for Bangladesh to handle, because they need to handle their own situation, and we do not want to speak or comment on anything that's internal, which means till the time it's confined to domestic. When things blow out of proportion, when things reach such a magnitude that we are seeing today, there is going to be a spillover into how it impacts India and our security. Why do you think, Anna, there is such massive security presence right now at the border between India and Bangladesh? Because there is going to be spillover.
Right.
Whether it was the liberation war of Bangladesh, or for that matter, every time there was a riotous situation, we've seen Bangladeshis come into India seeking asylum for economic purposes and otherwise, right?
Yeah.
They've always come. And this time around, what you're expecting is not a lot of Muslims coming in, but a lot of the Hindus who would want to. So there's a call that India would have to take, because not so long ago, Dr. Jaishankar said, why can't we call ourselves a Hindu Rashtra? And why can't we think and care for Hindus across the world? What's wrong in being that? So, well, here are Hindus from Bangladesh who will be seeking help very soon.
Yeah.
And they're a huge number.
Yeah.
And we'll see how India can accommodate that request of Hindus, right? So that's when the thin line is no longer an internal affair, but becomes a regional and particularly a bilateral affair between India and Bangladesh. And India certainly then has to comment.
Yeah.
And certainly is the reason why Dr. Jaishankar spoke in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha on the situation in Bangladesh. So it is an internal matter on what happens politically within Bangladesh, but it certainly no longer is an internal matter when Sheikh Hasina is sitting in New Delhi. And it certainly is not an internal matter when you have a situation on the boil at the border.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I mean, if you would have just spoken previously, probably this wouldn't have happened right now, what we are seeing.
I don't know.
I mean, that's too
And
far-fetched.
we just don't know.
But yeah. But
because if it was just about quota, the rollback was announced, right?
Yeah.
So now it is political.
Yeah.
So you don't know. It could have been a quota case. It could have been anything that could have triggered a political backlash.
Yeah, because
It was in the making, I think.
Yeah, this very right.
Long in the making.
This was in the making, yeah. It was right there in the back burner.
Yeah.
But so we'll put an end to this. Just lastly, as we leave, how do you think Bangladeshis are going to see India right now? Because India is one of those countries that was, which did not interfere in its internal matters. It didn't interfere when it was being, accused time and again of Hasina being an autocratic leader.
Come again. See, that's what I'm saying. You say that, there's been no interference or meddling. Define that. There's no interference like overt, going there and saying, well, this is India.
Said that, monitored. We have monitored.
No, but internal conversations or engagement. I'm only thinking, did we engage the opposition enough or not? Because then we are going to be looking very bad. But coming back to your question on Bangladeshis, I don't think right now Bangladesh is concerned about how the ties are going to be with India.
Yeah.
They're looking at India only because Sheikh Hasina is here.
Yeah, like they have, I mean,
that's why there's a lot of focus.
Yeah, the first country
But apart from that, they're looking at what happens to us now. There is jubilation and celebration in the opposition camp. You can see that in the streets. Apart from the violence, there's also a lot of celebration, right?
Yeah.
But for those who are Awami supporters, they are fearing. A lot of them have locked themselves up inside their houses. A lot of them have gone and are staying in their friends' homes. I have friends who are doing that.
Yeah.
Some of the news media houses, their offices were ransacked. So journalists are in trouble who reported against Jamaat and were reporting with what the government of the day was doing. And today they find themselves in a very, very difficult place. So if this transition was about even if it was China, Pakistan, the West, whoever wanted Sheikh Hasina out, if they would have ensured that there's going to be no backlash and vindictiveness, then we could have said, okay, this is the transition that was in the making. But this orchestrated transition certainly will have there's a heavy price to pay for this. And that comes at a cost of human lives, damage to property, displacement if people are going to leave Bangladesh, and again, political instability, at least for a while. What I can say is that maybe there's some hope in Professor Muhammad Yunus. Awami League might not like him, so on and so forth, but he's a very centered man. He is a man who has a very stable, strong head over his shoulders.
Yeah.
And if he were to advise, the first thing he would do, which was also actually a part of the presidential meeting outcome, and I forgot to mention it, and let's end it with that, that they absolutely have to ensure communal harmony. So he also absolutely would want to ensure no violence, and especially no violence against minorities. You have to bring the country together. If they can bring the country together, and if BNP and Jamaat can understand the importance, they have destroyed Mujibur Rahman's memorial. There could have been no Bangladesh without Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, right? But today they are okay doing that.
And worse is the fact that people are calling it as a student revolution.
Yeah,
it's like a glorified way. I mean,
a lot of people are saying this is the second liberation war.
Goodness.
So each to his own. It's a country. There are people, they might have their views, and this might be their view. But if it ends up with somebody sensible who says no communal disharmony, let's look at progress, let's bring the country together, then maybe there'll be some semblance of sanity. And you might not have a friend in your neighborhood, but you might certainly not have a country that will be inimical towards India in harboring terrorists. Because if that is disallowed, we're okay.
Yeah. Perfect, actually.
We're not okay with terrorism coming back.
Of course.
Through Bangladesh. If that is disallowed, if that is contained, we're partly okay. And so is Bangladesh. Right now, they were right there when it came to GDP and growth.
Right. And
so that should be their focus right now.
Okay, I think we'll put an end on that note, because there's a lot. I think Bangladesh is going to appear on this podcast time and again now, because there are lots to happen. Like India has, maintained a wait and watch policy. On our podcast also, we'll sort of maintain this wait and watch policy, because, there's a learning. There's definitely a learning, because, I heard somebody saying that there's learning of believing that power is not eternal. It can be snatched. Anything can happen. So Bangladesh is definitely like a very poignant, very pertinent example of that. So tell us in the comments and write to us of whatever has ensued and whatever will happen in the future. How do you view that? Tell us on 8588966996, or you could also email us on pods@indiatoday.com. Thank you so much, Geeta. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to our viewers too. Thank you.